One millionaire thrown in a creek for his fortune, but a poor boy discovered an incredible truth. It was a scene straight out of a small-town nightmare. Harold Whitmore, once the pride of Millfield with his shiny cars and grand mansion, had fallen from grace, like a statue cracked and toppled from its pedestal. The townsfolk were fuming, driven wild by a whirlwind of resentment as they dragged him to the banks of the creek, the very spot where he used to commemorate his wealth with boat parties and smiling faces. Now, there were only scowls and anger. "Enough is enough!" someone shouted, the crowd buzzing with a contagious ferocity. They hurled accusations, stinging darts of betrayal that struck deep. Harold stood there, shoulders slumped as the reality of his downfall washed over him. Among the chaos was Jimmy, a scrappy 13-year-old boy, all knobby knees and hopeful dreams. He was used to looking hardship in the eye, his family's struggles an unyielding weight. But as Jimmy watched, heart pounding, he realized the truth brewing inside him, a longing for compassion in a world thirsting for revenge. With swift resolve, he pushed through the throng. "Stop!" he shouted, but the weight of anger drowned him out. The crowd raved, blinded by their fury, and soon Harold was hoisted and thrown into the muddy waters. Panic surged through Jimmy's veins. He dove into the creek, arms cutting through the chill as he swam toward Harold, murky water swirling around them both. Grabbing Harold's flailing arm, he pulled him up, gasping for breath. "Why are you doing this?" Jimmy cried out, his voice laced with desperation. A flicker of surprise crossed Harold's face, mingled with something more, a glimpse of hope. As he emerged from the water, dripping and defeated, a connection formed. Over the next few minutes, as they caught their breaths, they began to talk. Harold shared stories of his earlier life, how success once felt like victory, yet loneliness had crept in like a sneaky shadow. Jimmy listened with wide eyes, his heart throbbing. "People don't see the real you," Jimmy said, "they just want to blame you. But I think you're more than your money." Before they could explore this burgeoning friendship further, the crowd shifted back in their anger, ready to mete out justice. It was time to confront this fallen giant they once idolized. Jimmy felt a mix of fear and determination as he stood defiantly next to Harold, advocating for understanding in a world spinning on judgment. "Harold, isn't what you think," he shouted, voice trembling yet strong. "He is trying. He has been giving back. Helping families like mine." Once Jerry shouted in disbelief, "You really believe that?" "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mistakes were made," Harold called, voice cracking as he stepped forward. "But I've funded the food pantry. I helped our basketball teams. I didn't want to be a villain." The crowd went silent, their anger dripping like rain off a roof. Jimmy, heart racing, felt something shift. Could they see the truth? Would they rebuild understanding instead of drowning in resentment? But even as hope flickered, uncertainty lingered, wrapping around them like the fog rising off the creek. Would the townsfolk embrace this new narrative, or cling to the bitterness that had sustained them for so long? The silence held for a moment, an unexpected breath swallowed by doubt. The crowd shifted, but their eyes remained glued to Harold, half submerged and half redeemed on the bank of the creek. Uncertain faces reflected the inner turmoil brewing within them. Hatred and compassion wrestled for dominance, and in that fleeting moment, Jimmy felt the weight of the world upon his shoulders. "Don't just stand there," someone yelled, breaking the spell. "He's a fraud." The accusations came flooding back, harder and louder than before. Jimmy could feel the heart of Millfield thumping wildly, caught in the storm of conflicting emotions. He knew this wasn't just about Harold anymore, it was about him too. It was about everyone who had been pinched and pushed to the brink, asking for justice but finding anger instead. "Look at him!" Jerry shouted, jabbing a finger toward Harold. He gave us nothing but empty promises. Our families were hurting while he sat in his ivory tower. Stop! Jimmy screamed, voice raw and fierce. You don't get it. You don't know the whole story. But the words hung in the air, unanchored. Harold's eyes darted between the crowd and the boy beside him, both searching for signs of solidarity, yet facing a sea of hostility. It would be easier to break away, to leave it all behind and disappear into the water. But something deep inside him, a flicker of the man he used to be, pulled him back. I want to make this right, Harold said, voice trembling as he stepped closer to the gathered crowd. You deserve better. I want to work with you to rebuild trust. Just give me a chance. Why should we? A woman called from the back, her voice thick with hurt. You've taken everything from us. How do we know this isn't just another stunt? Because I'm willing to do the hard work, Harold replied, now hungry for understanding. I'm willing to listen, to learn, to change. I want to help Millfield heal, not just from my mistakes but from all our struggles. The wind swept across the creek, stirring the tension thick as molasses. Jimmy looked at Harold, seeing a flicker of desperation in his eyes. It mirrored the struggle within the townsfolk, the desperate longing for change wrapped in layers of betrayal. Please, just listen to him, Jimmy said, stepping forward with determination. Isn't that what we all want? To be heard? Maybe Harold isn't the villain we've made him out to be. Maybe he is a reflection of us all lost, but willing to find his way back. A teenager in the crowd shifted uneasily. What does he know about our struggles? He has never lived like us. Maybe not, Jimmy shot back, embers of anger fueling him. But he has faced his own demons. And everyone here has. We can come together and change our story. But we have to want it. Together. As Jimmy's words filled the air, something shifted again. Quiet murmurs arose, uncertainty teetering on a knife's edge. Harold's heart raced, his breath hitching in his throat. Could this be the turning point? Would the townsfolk rally around an unexpected alliance, or would they vanish back into their rooms, crushed by their past? The creek rippled around them, a soft reminder that nothing in life stays still for long. But as the first drops of rain fell, mingling with the murky waters of the creek, a new tension began to unravel, a tension that hinted at either healing or deeper conflict. Can we really forgive? A voice broke through, threading through everyone's thoughts. With these 5 words, the air buzzed with questions, each heart pounded with doubt. Could they find a way to reforge the bonds of community, or was it too late for that? The rain fell faster now, spilling from the gray clouds above like tears from a broken heart. It mixed with the creek, creating ripples that danced across the surface, mirroring the restless emotions swirling within the crowd. As drops landed on Harold's shoulders, he felt the weight of their judgment, but also an unexpected lightness. Perhaps it was the beginning of something. What do we do now? Someone whispered, breaking the tension. The crowd seemed to lean toward one another, an invisible thread connecting their fears and hopes. Harold sensed the shift, the fragile moment where anger had begun to breathe life into a desire for something better. He took a deep breath. We talk, he said, his voice steadier now, fueled by a newfound determination. I'll answer your questions. I've hidden from you, but it's time to be honest. The crowd fell silent, the raindrops now the loudest sound. Slowly, as if testing the waters, a few people stepped forward, friends and neighbors, faces etched with skepticism but alive with curiosity. Jerry was one of them, fists still clenched, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. This better not be another lie, Jerry grumbled, folding his arms against the chill. But even he couldn't hide the glimmer of hope in his eyes. It's not, Harold replied, sincerity pouring out like the rain. I made mistakes, but I've started to understand how deeply they affected you all. I was so focused on my own success that I lost sight of my community. I want to set it right, to face everything I did head on. With a cautious nod, a former shop owner spoke up. You emptied our stores. Families struggled. How do we know you aren't just trying to save face? I know I can't just take it all back, Harold admitted, swallowing hard. But I can help restore what we've lost. Let us create jobs, put in the work together. I want to fund community projects, rebuild our homes, revitalize this town. The crowd shifted again, whispers brushing through like the wind. Unsure voices wrestled with harsh memories. Millfield had suffered so much already. Could it handle more broken promises? Words are just words, another woman challenged, her eyes flashing. We need action. Show us. Be here, side by side with us, every day. I will, Harold said, a fire igniting within him. If I don't show up, then I'm no better than the man you believed I was. I won't let that happen. I promise you that. Slowly, the crowd began to mirror the fragments of his confidence. It was less conflict now and more a communal breath held too long, each person slowly exhaling as doubts transformed into questions. What about our kids? They need education, a future. Are we just going to fix this ourselves? Yes. Absolutely. Jimmy chimed in, stepping forward again, his voice infused with youthfulness. We can do this together. We can teach them what we've learned. Change doesn't need to happen in isolation, we can help each other. There was a stir in the crowd, faces began to soften. Hope began to take root among the darkness. We can start a meeting every week, someone called out cautiously. Yes. Others echoed. Let us discuss ideas. Harold has to show up. Came a clear voice from the back, and this time there was no doubt in the crowd. As they animatedly exchanged thoughts, the rain continued to wash away remnants of hesitation, nourishing the seeds of a possible alliance. Harold felt the warmth of unity building, igniting within his chest. But just as their chatter grew lively, a harsh voice cut through the budding hope. And what if it's all one big scam? It was a newcomer, someone unfamiliar. A shadow among the unsteady light. How do we know we won't just end up worse off? Who are you to promise us this? The atmosphere stilled, the joy quaking beneath a potent layer of fear. Would they have to grapple with yet another betrayal? Would this newfound feeling last, or would it all come crashing down? As the raindrops danced to a trembling stop, the question lingered, echoing in everyone's heart. Could they really believe in each other when trust lay in shambles? The crowd fell silent. Each person shifted uncomfortably, uncertainty hanging in the air like thick fog. Harold could feel eyes narrowing in skepticism. He cleared his throat, desperation creeping into his tone. I know trust isn't easy. I won't pretend to have answers for everything. But I'm here to fight for this town, for all of you. We need to bring our stories out into the open. I can't fix this alone. The newcomer smirked. How convenient. A millionaire with a sudden thirst for community service. You think we'll just forget the past? A ripple of agreement passed through the audience, as some nodded while others exchanged glances. Harold felt his heart race. He had opened a door, but a hurricane was ready to burst through. I won't demand your trust, he said, voice raw. But give me a chance to prove myself. Let us start at the beginning. What can I do to help right now? Jerry stepped forward again, wariness still etched on his face. Can you really give us jobs? Can you bring the businesses back? Yes. I can, Harold replied, his hands trembling as he spoke. I have connections, resources, even investors who believe in second chances. It won't happen overnight, but we can start small, maybe finding ways for local farmers to sell directly to markets. Let us turn this around together. Another voice chimed in, softer and filled with hesitance. What happens if things don't change? What if we end up in debt again? The questions continued to come, each cutting deeper. All doubts were now laid bare, fear mixing with fresh resolve. I can offer my time, Jimmy urged, inspired by the gathering. We can host workshops to teach kids online skills, fix up our community center, make it a place for everyone. Harold watched as flickers of hope spread through the crowd. Together, they began discussing plans, each idea illuminating a path forward. It was messy and tentative, but the connection started to weave back together, thread by thread. But just as optimism began to bloom, the newcomer wasn't done. And what about the projects you failed with before? The money you took? Why should we believe your apologies now? Harold's chest tightened at the accusation. It was the same harsh truth he had been wrestling with. "You're right," he admitted. "I was wrong, and I wasn't around when you needed me the most. I want to run from that. I want to rebuild my mistakes with all of you. My wealth doesn't mean anything without this community." That last sentence hung like a lifeline, and slowly, intrigue began to replace some of the skepticism. The energy in the crowd shifted, hearts softening as people considered the possibility of a shared future. Hope sprouted amidst despair, and then, someone raised their voice again, a woman with tired eyes. "If you truly want to help, we need you here. Every day, willing to invest in us not just your money, but your time. Meet us where we are." "Yes." Many voices rallied. "Every day. Show us you care." Harold couldn't remember ever seeing such fierce determination. Their collective spirit ignited a warmth within him, propelling him forward. "Count on me. I'll show up. I'll be here, not just as your benefactor but as your neighbor." As rain clouds began to break, letting in rays of sunshine, hope started to fill spaces where doubt had once lingered. Every shared idea provided a spark, and this group, once deeply divided, lined up behind the promise of change. But just when unity felt attainable, a loud crash echoed from the nearby creek. The crowd fell silent again, instincts pulling everyone's gaze toward the source of the noise. A figure emerged, struggling and soaked, but there was something or someone in their hands. "Help! Someone fell in!" Came a panicked shout, and just like that, as adrenaline filled the air, the excitement of possibilities transformed into urgency. Without a second thought, Harold rushed forward, ready to dive in and face whatever lay beneath the surface. Who was in that water? Was it one of his neighbors? As he plunged into the creek, the chilling water surged around him, and all he could think was this the moment that would either end the hope he'd built, or redefine it entirely? The water enveloped Harold cold and sharp against his skin. Every instinct screamed at him to fight against the current, but his focus was solely on the figure that had vanished beneath the surface. Heart pounding, he kicked harder, desperate to reach whatever or whoever was in distress. The world above faded into muffled noises, a distant din of panic. As he breached the surface, gasping for breath, he caught a glimpse of something, a splash of bright red against the brown water. It was a backpack bobbing in the currents. Panic surged through him. A child? "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. With every stroke, he pushed through the cold, feeling the weight of dread pull at him. The shouts from the crowd morphed into a blur, and all Harold could focus on was finding the child if there was one. He spotted a small shape struggling a few feet away, flailing helplessly. It was a boy, no older than 10, his face twisted in terror. Harold's stomach dropped. "Grab my hand!" Harold yelled, extending his arm as far as he could. The boy's eyes widened. With a fierce determination born from fear, he lunged toward Harold, but the water had other plans. A surge knocked him off course. Harold lunged, arms outstretched, pulling the boy toward him. Their hands locked, and Harold felt the fragile weight of the child in his grip. He kicked hard, driven by a primal need to survive. "Just hold on. I've got you." The words echoed in his own head, a mantra of resolve. The boy was panicking, eyes darting. Then, the weight shifted between them, and Harold felt his strength wane. He couldn't let go. Not now. With a final surge of energy, he wrapped his other arm around the boy and kicked toward the shoreline. One push after another, he fought against the water, the struggle heavy and raw. Together they broke through, sputtering and gasping as they reached the bank. Spectators rushed forward, reaching down to pull them from the clutches of the creek. Harold faltered backward, still clutching the boy, dragging him up the muddy slope. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and shouts. "Someone call 911! Is he okay?" Breathless, Harold cradled the boy, who coughed and gasped. "You're safe now," Harold murmured, his heart still racing. The boy blinked, eyes filled with confusion, fear, but eventually settling into relief. The wet onlookers moved closer, faces painted with shock and awe. That newcomer, who had scorned Harold only moments before, now stepped back, expression shifting from skepticism to something bordering on admiration. Harold's ribs ached from the cold, and yet warmth bloomed in his chest. This was it, the moment he had fought for. The very heart of the community was laid bare, emergency intertwining their fates in a way he never anticipated. As sirens wailed closer, the weight of what had happened began to settle in. He looked at the boy again, now cradled in the arms of a concerned mother who had rushed to the bank. Relief washed over Harold as he realized that perhaps they could indeed come together, not just in crisis, but in building something real. But then came the unexpected, a small voice breaking through the crowd. "Harold!" It was Jerry, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What if you had drowned? You can't just throw your life away for some mistake." The weight of those words hung like lead in the air. The tension, good intentions clashing with fear, was thick. Had he gone too far this time? Would his decision to leap into danger for someone else cost him the very chance he sought to create change? As he looked around, uncertainty clouded the hope he had stirred just moments before. The world felt unfocused, caught between what had been, what could be, and what might just slip through his fingers once more. Was this how community was built, or just a desperate rescue that revealed all that still lay broken? Behind the chaos, Harold's resolve hardened. He would not retreat. But what did the future hold when the sirens faded and the community quieted? What would it mean for him if he couldn't even save himself? Time would tell. Harold stood on the muddy bank, still trembling with adrenaline and confusion. The murmurs of the crowd floated around him like cotton, muffling the reality that he had just clawed a boy back from a dangerous fate. As the boy's mother hugged her son tight, gratitude radiated from her like a beacon. Yet, a shadow loomed over Harold, especially from Jerry, who hovered close, arms crossed and brows knitted tight. "Harold, listen!" Jerry lowered his voice, urgency flaring in his eyes. "That was reckless! You could have died for what? A child you don't even know!" Harold wanted to lash out, to tell Jerry that he knew exactly what he'd done. But the words somehow lodged in his throat. Instead, he turned away and focused on the scene unfolding before him, the boy now lying on a blanket, his body quaking as his mother stroked his hair, whispering reassurances. Harold felt a pull, a longing to connect with that moment as he watched a transformation happen, fear giving way to relief, despair replaced by hope. A collective breath of the crowd exhaled in unison, as the sirens echoed closer, their shrill wail cutting through the moment. The paramedics arrived, moving with swiftness. They knelt beside the boy, checking for injuries, their professionalism a stark contrast to the rawness of the chaos. Harold studied the onlookers. Faces reflected awe, shock, and a sense of something akin to unity. He knew this scene was pivotal. Was this what he had been fighting for? A spark of understanding that could ignite change? But those thoughts felt fragile, like a whisper in a storm. Jerry's words echoed in the back of his mind. What had he risked? "Haven't you learned anything from this?" Jerry pressed, his voice raised just enough to draw attention. "No," Harold snapped. "I learned that people matter. I learned that being afraid to act doesn't save anyone. It just leaves them to drown." As soon as he spoke, he wished he could reel the words back in. They hung in the air, thick with tension. The boy's mother caught his gaze, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else, maybe respect? But also a hint of understanding. She had felt the fear too, the horror of helplessness. Maybe there was a bridge forming where fear had once been. Jerry shook his head. It was a miracle this time. What about next time? Don't make it a habit to play the hero. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, and for a moment, Harold felt untethered, the world tilted on its axis, blurring reality. He could feel the uncertainty echoing from Jerry's words. Was he chasing the thrill of heroism rather than making real change? As the paramedics helped the boy to his feet, the crowd began to disperse, leaving Harold standing there, watching the tiny figure regain his footing. But then, as the boy turned to look at him, their eyes met. A flicker of recognition passed, something deep and unspoken. In that moment, Harold realized it wasn't just about saving lives. It was about the connections forged in desperate times, The boy's face split into a hesitant smile. It was small, but it was a beginning. Suddenly, a fire ignited within Harold. He could change things. He could fight for this boy and others, not just in crisis but every day. He took a step toward the boy, determined to foster that moment of connection, to stand for those who felt powerless. But just before he could reach him, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Jerry again, a soft tremor in his tone. "What are you doing, Harold?" Could he really do this? Was this the moment they would begin to build something together, or just another fleeting encounter? The edges of the crowd faded as Harold turned back, hope mixing with uncertainty as he met Jerry's eyes. Behind him, the boy took a step forward, uncertain but eager. The past spilled into the present, and within Harold, a new resolve blossomed. The question loomed larger than life: would this lead to something more, or would it unravel just as quickly? As he stood there, watching the boy take another tentative step, Harold realized this was just the beginning. How far? Would he really go to fight for what mattered? And at what cost? Harold's heart raced as he faced Jerry, the moment crystallizing like a fragile snowflake. "I'm trying to help," he finally replied, his voice steadier than he felt. The weight of doubt lingered in the air between them. "Help? Or play the hero?" Jerry shot back, disappointment flickering in his eyes. "What happens when you can't save someone? What if you're not around when it really counts?" A rush of anger flared within Harold. He felt like a volcano about to erupt. "Maybe I don't need a safety net, Jerry. I'm starting to think that there might be more to life than just waiting for disaster to strike." The boy, still gazing at Harold with those bright, hopeful eyes, seemed oblivious to the exchange. He took another step closer, encouraged by Harold's defiance. It was as if he sensed the truth, the understanding that sometimes, taking a risk was better than hiding behind caution. A siren wailed in the distance, pulling the attention of the remaining crowd. As they began to drift away, Harold felt something shift in him. He wasn't just a bystander capable of instigating change, he was becoming a catalyst. "Okay, say you do this," Jerry said, arms still crossed, softer now. "What's next?" "You'll need a plan. You can't do it alone." Harold nodded. "I know that. But I can't stand by and do nothing. Not anymore." He turned to the boy, his heart swelling with resolve. "What's your name?" he called, voice cutting through the noise around them. "Eddie," the boy replied, his smile widening. "Eddie, what do you want? What do you need?" Eddie hesitated, glancing at his mother, who stood a few feet away, still gently wiping tears from her cheeks. I want to help others too," he finally blurted out, voice bright with conviction. It was innocent yet powerful, a simple wish that echoed between them, binding their spirits together. "Then we will," Harold said, the promise slipping from his lips like an heirloom. "We will do this together." Jerry finally dropped his arms, breaking away from his vigil. "How?" "You just pulled one kid from a creek." "By starting small," Harold said, glancing at the parents who were mostly gone but who still murmured with conversations of relief and gratitude. "Eddie's not the only one." "He's right," Jerry conceded, the hesitance still palpable. A new idea sparked in Harold's mind, and he felt a rush of excitement. "What if we form a group? A prevention effort? It could be just us at first, a few neighbors, family, but we can teach people. We can help educate everyone on what to do in emergencies. It starts right here." Eddie's eyes lit up, reflecting the energy rising within Harold. Could they really do this? Start a movement out of a moment that almost ended in tragedy? "Together," Harold added, a smile creeping onto his lips. "If we all put in a little, surely we can make a change." "Well then, let us get to it," Eddie exclaimed, a spark of inspiration lighting the fire in the hearts nearby. Harold felt buoyant, the weight of responsibility mixing with a heady sense of purpose. He glanced back at Jerry, searching for reassurance. "What do you think?" he asked, unsure how his colleague would respond to such ambition. Jerry sighed but then nodded slightly, a ghost of a smile forming. "Count me in for now." The wind whispered between them, carrying the promise of tomorrow as they began to gather supporters, unaware that their united front could soon attract attention from all corners of their town. As they rallied those around them, a sense of energy radiated into the evening air. But as the sun dipped behind the horizon, a foreboding shadow fell over Harold. Just then, he caught sight of a figure in the distance, someone watching from the edge of the park, face obscured by the twilight. Who was that lurking in the shadows? What did they want? The night wrapped its arms around them, and Harold could feel a storm approaching. Would they be ready when the next challenge came knocking? As the last rays of sunlight slipped away, the park transformed into a different world. A veil of twilight descended, and the shadows lengthened, creating an eerie landscape. Harold rubbed his eyes, convinced he was imagining things. But the figure remained, still and silent at the edge of the grass. "Do you guys see that?" he whispered to Jerry and Eddie, who stood by his side. "See what?" Jerry replied, scanning the area but finding nothing amiss. "That figure over there. I swear someone's watching us." His heart raced again, but this time it felt laced with apprehension. Harold took a cautious step forward, urging his friends to stay put. "I'll check it out," he said, even as doubt crept into his mind. What if it was someone with ill intentions? Or worse, someone who knew about the rescue, preparing to tear down what he had just started to build? "Be careful," Eddie called after him, the innocence of his voice ringing like a bell in the darkening air. The distance closed between them as Harold took each step, his mind filled with the heaviness of uncertainty. With every moment, he could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, urging him to confront whatever was lurking ahead. The figure remained silhouetted against the deepening sky, a mannequin cast in night. Just as he drew near, the figure shifted. It was a woman, her features barely visible in the fading light. She took a step forward, and he could make out the sharp angles of her face and the determination in her stance. "I've been watching you," she said, her voice steady yet threatening, slicing through the air like a knife. "What do you want?" Harold managed to ask, inwardly cursing himself for the tremor in his tone. "I want to help you." Harold blinked, stunned by the unexpected response. She wasn't the antagonist he had anticipated. Instead, there was an urgency in her eyes that caught him off guard. "Help?" he repeated, skepticism dripping from his words. "Why would you want to help us? We just started this thing." The woman took a breath and stepped closer. "Because I know what it's like to stand at the edge of change and not know what to do. I once was in your shoes, and I lost everything." "What do you mean?" Harold felt the warmth of genuine curiosity creeping in. "There was a time when I cared about nothing but wealth." Her voice softened, revealing an emotion that seemed to ripple through her. "But a tragedy changed me. I lost my son in a preventable accident." The wind howled softly, echoing the gravity of her words. Harold's heart twisted, not entirely from pity but a sharp want to understand. "I created systems to prevent those kinds of accidents, but I became overwhelmed by my own guilt. Maybe, just maybe, this is the chance to save someone else's child." Her story started to ignite something within him. "Then why are you lurking? Why not come forward? I didn't know if you'd be open to help. People don't always want it." She gestured toward Eddie and Jerry, who looked on with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Let us call the others back," Harold decided, feeling a sudden urge to unify their group. "I think you might just be the help we really need." As he turned to signal, the heavy silence was shaken by a shattering sound, a burst of noise that shattered the fragile calm. It was a crash from the nearby creek, followed by a desperate shout. Harold whirled around, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. "Harold! Someone needs help!" Eddie yelled, pointing toward the source of the commotion. Adrenaline surged through him, and everything else faded. The figure and her story ceased to matter. A call for help needed them now. Would Harold be prepared for another rescue, or was this challenge about to test their new alliance to its breaking point? Harold raced toward the creek, each step fueled by fear and determination. The darkness around him felt alive, an entity linked to the urgency of Eddie's words. The water reflected the dim light from the distant street lamps, shimmering ominously as it flowed. "Over here!" Eddie shouted again, his voice echoing with just enough panic to send chills down Harold's spine. As Harold reached the water's edge, his heart sank. A man, soaked and desperate, was floundering in the water, grasping at the slippery rocks like a drowning man grasping for life itself. Panic tightened around Harold's chest. He didn't know this man, but the sight felt like a flashback to too many rescues, so much life spent saving others at the edge of despair. "I can't swim!" the man yelled, his voice trembling in the evening air. Harold could see the terror etched across his face, illuminated by the shimmering surface of the creek, each desperate splash sending waves toward the bank. "Stay calm. We're going to get you out," Harold yelled back, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The water was swift, and the man appeared to be overwhelmed. He hardly seemed to register Harold's command, struggling against the current. Jerry and Eddie scrambled to his side. "What's the plan?" Jerry called, looking nervously at the rushing water. "Someone needs to reach him," Harold shouted. "I can't go in. I'll be swept away." Eddie nodded, glancing frantically over his shoulder. "I'll throw him a rope," he said, moving toward his backpack. The riverbank was muddy and slippery, but he managed to anchor himself, retrieving a sturdy line from his bag. With a quick motion, Eddie tossed the rope out toward the flailing man. The line fell short, landing just out of the man's reach. "Grab the rope!" Eddie shouted, his voice strained. The man lunged forward, grasping it with both hands, but the current yanked it. Panic surged through Harold as he watched the man slip further downriver, the rope slipping from his grip, dragging its saviors with it. "Harold! We need another plan," Jerry called, his face pale with fear, the urgency of the moment tightening his features. Just then, the woman, the one who claimed she wanted to help, moved forward, her eyes searching the scene. "I can go in," she declared, determination painted on her face. The three boys stared at her, their shock palpable. "Are you crazy?" Jerry barked, but Harold felt a strange sense of calm descend over him. Maybe she was right. "Do it," he said firmly. "We can't let him drown." The woman took off her jacket and prepared to dive into the chilly waters. As she became silhouetted against the darkness, Harold wondered if this was a rescue or a foolish leap toward danger. With one powerful stroke, she leaped in, cutting through the water like a blade. Immediately, the man's eyes went wide. "Help me! Please!" he screamed again. Harold held his breath, the moment stretching as he watched the woman reach for the desperate man. She grasped his arm tightly, but the strength of the flow began dragging them both under. "Hold on!" she called, her voice breaking through the crash of rushing water. Then, just as if the world had shifted around him, he felt a wave of clarity. The potential for a true alliance and collective strength bathed him in purpose. He set his jaw, ready to act, unwilling to let fear dictate their fate. "Eddie!" he shouted. "Get that rope ready again and brace yourself. We're going to pull them to safety." Hope ignited alongside fear as they set their plan in motion. Would they be able to rescue them in time, or would they, too, be swept away by the current of despair? With determination surging through him, Harold stepped into the frigid water. His feet sank into the mud, and the current tugged at his legs, but he refused to be anchored down by fear. "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos as he focused on the woman struggling to keep the man afloat. She gritted her teeth, her arms straining against the pull of the creek. Their strength combined barely kept them above the surface, and Harold's heart raced with urgency. Eddie and Jerry scrambled to the riverbank, wrapping the rope around their arms, breath held in anticipation. "Ready!" Eddie called, eyes steeled with resolve. "On three," Harold yelled, his gaze locked on the two figures in the water. 1, 2, 3. They heaved the rope skyward, the fibers taut against their strength. The woman glanced back, eyes filled with fierce desperation, and the man, his body weak and heavy, reached out, fingers grazed the rope. Every second felt like 1,000, every heartbeat stretched thin as life clung to that fragile moment. "Grab it!" Jerry shouted, bracing in the mud. With a sudden surge of energy, the man lunged forward, catching the rope. Harold felt a flicker of hope, a spark igniting in the depths of chaos. "Hold tight!" Eddie shouted, pulling with all he had. There was a moment of hesitance, the water writhing around them, but steadfastness drove them onward. Through gritted teeth, the woman and the man latched onto the rope, fighting against the relentless current. One more pull, and they surged closer, water cascading as they pressed on, every effort an act of faith, intertwining their fates. Just as Harold thought they had victory, newly washed up soil crumbled beneath Jerry's feet, sending him slightly off balance. "Focus, Jerry!" Harold barked, adrenaline propelling him into overdrive. "Almost there!" Eddie shouted, heart brimming with hope, as the gap between life and death narrowed with every determined tug. They finally caught a glimpse of the woman's hand on firmer ground, her fingers clawing at the earth. "Just a bit more," Harold urged, the anguish in his heart boiling over to desperation. Fear screamed at him, but beneath it rested a steady resolve that together they could wield an undeniable power. With one final thrust, they strained back against the tide, hands digging deep into the earth, breaths held. The water surged around them, but the rope's hold tightened as if it were alive, determined to shepherd them to safety. Then, with a rush of water that felt like a tidal wave of relief, they pulled the woman and the man up, gasping, sputtering at the water's edge. Cheers erupted, echoes of disbelief surrounding them like a warm blanket after a long fight against the cold. As relief washed over the crowd, the shadows flitting in the distance faded. No longer did they loom threateningly at the edges of hope. They stood together, unified by a singular moment, a choice made to help, a decision to protect, not just in crisis but for every day that followed. Harold fell to his knees, panting. The man lay on the bank, shivering but alive, a grateful expression reflected on his sopping face. The woman knelt beside him, capturing both his hand and his heart, the connection tearing apart the fear and uncertainty. And in the silence that followed, a realization washed over them all. Less about a singular rescue and more about a community built on understanding, trust, and pulled to the surface of collective action. Eddie rushed in, vibrant with uncontainable energy. "What if we start a safety initiative? We can work together!" he exclaimed, the fire in his voice igniting a movement among the onlookers. Noticing him, the woman nodded, newly empowered by their experience. "That's it," she said, her voice meeting the resolve echoed throughout Millfield. "Let us turn this terrifying night into a force for change. Together." Harold felt a wave of warmth surge through him, frantic emotions settling into a resonance of unity. He saw the glimmering promise of a new beginning, of transforming pain into purpose woven into the fabric of a community that wouldn't fail one another. Jeers of skepticism shifted to the exchanges of ideas, and together they began to discuss what they could build. Harold could feel the lightness in their hearts, a contagious spirit that whispered possibility. Each contribution was a stepping stone to healing, to fostering a culture of support and strength. "From the pain we've faced, let us create a team. We all have a role, we all can act," Harold proclaimed, confidence spilling onto the shores of the creek. Hands began to rise, notions forming, fragments of a plan waiting to be realized. Each voice resonated, and excitement buzzed, the hope transforming their reality. "That's right," Eddie shouted, enthusiasm infectious. "Let us share our stories, our skills, teach each other, and build a brighter future." Suddenly, the shadows that lingered receded entirely, weighed down by their actionable commitment, and the creek became a symbol not of despair, but of resolve. Millfield had hesitated, towards vengeance. Now they dared to shift towards support, claiming their story, each moment anchoring into a new narrative. Harold felt his heart swell. No longer was he just a man thrown into the depths of uncertainty, he was part of a tide swelling with life, hope rushing to shore. Together, they had wrapped their stories into a beautiful tapestry of understanding, forging a connection far beyond the creek. In this singular moment, he knew they would thrive, no longer standing alone, but shoulder to shoulder as equals striving towards redemption. The future stretched before him, wisps of possibility flaring bright against the canvas of the night sky. Now was the time to grow, to share, to create something undeniably impactful. As their voices rose and merged, Harold felt free, a newfound certainty coursing through him. They would walk this path together, the tide had turned, and the horizon shimmered with hope. Join the movement. Subscribe now to stay in the loop with stories that inspire change. You need to hit that like button. Remember to comment below and share your thoughts. It helps us grow, helps you stay engaged. And don't wait not even one more second to share this with at least 5 friends who need to feel this kind of transformation. Together, we can make waves.